The podcast you're listening to is part of the Second Union Podcast Network. You can listen, like, and subscribe to all our podcasts by heading over to wearesecondunion.com. Thank you for listening.
Hello and welcome back to the Cosmic Library, where you can read the greatest stories in all of the multiverse. I am Jeremy.
I'm Joanna.
And I am Jesse.
We are doing this show in conjunction with Second Union. For more of the latest headlines and entertainment, please go to our website at wearesecondunion.com. You know what? I recently heard that there's a pair of words in my future, and never have I been more excited and more afraid at the same time.
And what are those words?
Battle Royal.
Ooh.
I cannot give you further context on that because there hasn't been an actual announcement of it. But yes, those words are in my future.
You're going all Hunger Games on us?
Technically, I'd be going more $1 Million Man on you. But again, I can't go into further details on that.
Darn, I was trying to get information.
But how are you guys doing?
Doing decently. Have a cat in my lap.
Okay. All right. That's more affection than I've gotten lately, but that's all right. Jesse?
Yeah.
I am recovering from a major migraine over the weekend.
Ooh.
What'd I do?
I cannot say the words to describe that. We are a PG show.
Whoa. Okay,
Wow.
I do not drink, and I swear I've never blacked out, so I don't know what you're talking about. No, what happened? Migraine, what the hell?
No, to be honest, it's just bad health and bad diet.
Oh, okay. All right, that's fair enough. You know, I've been catching up with people, and I wouldn't call them side hustles, but my weird hobbies are just kind of popped up, and I had to deal with a few things that I'm still dealing with, and I'm still getting ready for WonderCon, which is happening in about 7 weeks here, and I'm physically excited for that one. It just makes me jittery to think about it because it's the first major convention I'm going to this year, and they've got a couple guests I would really like to get a couple minutes with and, expand my collection of art, my gigantic sketchbook that I've been carrying to different conventions.
Right.
I'm actually jazzed. I really want to see Jamal Charles. We read his work, or we saw his work in the Naomi comic.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
He is the person who helped design the look of Naomi, so he's listed as one of her co-creators, and I'm not saying I want Naomi necessarily, but I would really like to get a piece of artwork from that guy.
Cool.
On top of which I'm jazzed about seeing people I haven't seen in pretty much a year. And it's on my mind. I've already earned enough money in vacation time where the trip is pretty much is paid for. The time is there, and all I got to do is sign on the dotted line.
Nice. That'll be fun.
Yeah, I'm kind of spun up and excited. I'm also kind of jealous of one of my friends, a young lady named Gabby. It's her birthday today.
Oh, cool. Happy birthday, Gabby.
Yeah, and she had friends that were nice enough they took her to Disneyland today.
Lucky.
Oh, no. You don't understand. Not only did they take her to Disneyland, they took her to Savvy's Workshop.
I don't know what that is.
Savvy's
I'm from the Florida Disneyland. Not...
Okay, Savvy's Workshop is where you build the custom lightsabers.
Oh!
They got her a session, and I'm just staring at that going, why aren't my friends this awesome?
Why aren't my friends this awesome? I mean, goodness.
She posted the picture. She got herself a purple lightsaber, and she used the nature discipline, so her lightsaber has like this wide tooth at the bottom.
That's supposed to be a Rancor tooth, actually.
Oh, really? Okay. I never looked it up, so I'm just staring at it going, wow, that is really cool.
No, I actually watched a video about it, actually.
Yeah, I felt kind of bad because when Gabby announced like a few days ago that her friends were taking her to Disney for her birthday, I considered like calling in sick to work and just going, but as I've said, I've been working like lots of overtime, and that's how I'm paying for my own trips, and if I take a day off, then it makes it harder to catch up. So
I have a case of the rat virus.
Don't say rat virus right now. The internet is so silly that somebody will just say that you've invented the newest corona thing.
I mean,
the internet can be really stupid.
No, really.
I mean, we're on it.
Saying this greatly.
Yeah, how could it be? How could it be bright? We're on it. I mean, come on.
Hey now. You're talking about me now.
I know what I am.
You can say what you want about me, but don't talk like that about my horse. Or my podcast? I don't know. I was quoting Hidalgo.
I was just trying to picture you astride a horse, and I was about to ask so many questions.
I'm a pretty good horseback rider.
I'm always worried about riding horses because I have my self-esteem is like all over the map. So I'm convinced that if I ever walk up to a horse with meaning to ride it, it would look at me and just go, "Oh no, not that, no."
They can smell fear and they will test your will. I had this one, it was a trail riding horse, and his name was Captain, and he put his ears back, looked at me, and I looked at him. He stomped his hoof, and I stomped my foot back, and he just went, all right. So I got on him. He was part draft horse, big old boy, right? We're on the trail, and he's lagging behind. I'm like, come on, a little faster here. He bolts, and I've never galloped on a horse until that time. He bolts, like, from where he was a couple 100 yards to catch up with the rest. And then I'm, like, pulling on the reins, saying, whoa, slow down, hey now, anything. And he gets right up to the last horse in the row and just stops calmly and just kind of, like, looks over his shoulder like, yeah, who's in control? That's right, I thought so. And so the whole ride, I had the reins tight in my hands. I had blisters all over my hands, like raw and bloody. But every time he would lag behind, he would bolt forward and tried to hit me with a tree with the low-hanging branches. It was fun times, but I think I won out. I got him to stop.
I think that's how the Germans tried to get rid of Indiana Jones in the third movie.
No, that was with a tank and running
a rocky
against
cliff.
the cliff.
Yeah, just tried to rub
Yeah, and
off
he
on
did
the
the same
environment.
thing in The Mandalorian, too.
Yeah, that's right. I noticed that.
What can I say? Lucas has a type.
Guess so.
Well, the subject of this week is Transformers Galaxies issues 1 through 4 by IDW Comics. We will get to that after the news of the week. And we're going to start with Marvel comic news. We're going to talk about all the characters and stories owned by the House of Mouse and where they are headed. We know that there's an upcoming event this spring for Marvel Comics that appears to be pretty well line-wide called Empyre. The young Avenger known as Hulkling is now the Emperor of the combined forces of the Kree and the Skrull, and he's leading these forces to Earth space for an unknown reason. And we also know that there is a group of tie-in issues that are going to be associated with this event, and we have a little bit of information on 2 of them. The first one is scheduled to come out in May of 2020. It's called Lords of Empyre, Celestial Messiah. It's being written by Alex Packnadel and Alex Linz. The one-shot has a former Avenger looking for their son, Qui. Supposedly, there's galaxy-spanning consequences in the balance. Now, I mean, the tease as to who this is about primarily is right there in the title. Lords of Empyre, Celestial Messiah. Do you guys know who in the Marvel Comics is referred to as the Celestial Messiah?
No.
No.
Star-Lord.
You're actually closer than you think. That is the title that was originally bequeathed to Mantis.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Yeah.
I was in the right universe.
Something that a lot of Marvel Cinematic fans may not know when it comes to the comic book version of Mantis is that she is not just an empath. She's a precog as well. She's also a very talented martial artist, a little bit aloof. And the reason why she's the Celestial Messiah is that she, as well as feeling people's emotions, she prophesizes a lot. She wasn't an Avenger. She wasn't an Avenger very long, but her stint was notable because she just kind of left an impression with comics fans. She did circle back around in, I want to say, the 2006 second volume of the Guardians of the Galaxy as an administrator for the Guardians on Star-Lord's behalf. She would handle debriefings and member profiles after missions. This is her first major appearance that I'm aware of since that run. According to the solicits, quote, "The eve of Qui's ascension is at hand, but when the trials are interrupted by an unexpected interloper, Mantis, who will win this battle of wills? Don't miss out as mother and son go head-to-head, revealing secrets that will shape the course of the galaxy," unquote.
Interesting.
I'm not aware of Mantis' son, Qui. I may pick this up and flip through it only because, at the very least, this is a very new story to me, and I just don't know the details as to Mantis' son. I mean, we are talking about an alien and her alien son who appears to be a swordsman warlord of sorts.
I've never heard of him, but I didn't really delve too far into the Guardians of the Galaxy before the movies came out.
If you get a chance, and I say this knowing your taste as well as I do at this point, which isn't to say greatly, but I think I've come to understand them. You really
I don't like Mecha.
You really need to find the Dan Abnett and Albert Lanning run of Guardians of the Galaxy starting in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
These are the comic books that basically inspired the movies.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I would strongly recommend it. You'll probably see a bunch of things that you did not expect. I mean, my favorite character that's been cameoed in the movies but has really not been featured at all is Cosmo. Cosmo is a Russian dog. He was one of the 1970s, 1980s experiments that the Soviets were running. Yeah. And he was launched into space. He was found by an alien race who was so frustrated they couldn't communicate with it. They helped imbue this dog with telepathic abilities.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so you saw him in the collector's collection there.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that makes him special in the comics is that he is not just a one-off character. He was the security chief of the Nowhere Station.
Really?
Yeah, he was an intelligent dog. He was a very fair adjudicator. However, he and Rocket Raccoon butted heads, and neither of them understood why. They just intrinsically hated each other.
Makes a lot of sense.
It didn't to them. They just knew they did not like each other and had no idea why this was happening.
I mean, animal instincts, but okay.
Yeah. Their interactions were just hilarious. Another Empyre one-shot that's been revealed is Empyre X-Men. The mutants of Krakoa have a relatively unique problem when it comes to Empyre because it's going to take them to a place I don't think any of them like to go. It's being written by Jonathan Hickman, who right now is the creative head of the X-Men line, and Tini Howard. The art is by Matteo Buffagni. And get the solicit because there's a few key words in there that are really going to let you know how bad this could be. Oh, actually, it's a 4-issue mini. Excuse me. The solicit reads, quote, "It's going to be a battle so monumental that it'll take the entire writing crew of the X-Men to depict it. The intergalactic visitors coming to Earth in Marvel's 2020 event will be arriving just in time to face off against an army of mutant undead this May in Empyre X-Men. Don't miss the X-Men's strange return to Genosha in this unpredictable series, written by your favorite current X-Men writers. It all begins in Empyre X-Men #1, written by Head of X Jonathan Hickman and writer of Excalibur Tini Howard, and continues in Empyre #2, written by Jerry Dugan, Benjamin Percy, and Leah Williams, writer of the highly anticipated X Factor series." Unquote.
That's keywords. They just blatantly said it.
Which one?
Genosha?
Yeah. They are headed back to an island full of, if I remember correctly, about 6 million dead mutants.
Ooh.
It was part of the new X-Men run when Cassandra Nova was revealing herself to the world. Part of the way she did it was that there was a mutant island nation. Magneto had taken over Genosha, which had previously been a bunch of humans using mutants as a slave race. And, mutants had taken it over. The White Queen was a teacher in a school. Things seemed to be going, I wouldn't say well, but it was a functional dictatorship. And then Cassandra Nova sent her special Tri-Sentinel to the island. And just wiped out nearly every life on it. There have been a couple stories dealing with Genosha afterwards, but nothing really permanent because there's really nothing permanent there. And the solicit for the second one is even scarier. Quote, "The site of the first mutant nation-state, Genosha, had its population eradicated after a devastating Sentinel attack at the beginning of Grant Morrison's new X-Men run. Years later, the Black Queen Selene used her powers to transform the ruins of Genosha into her own undead kingdom, Necrosha, battling against the X-Men. Whether Selene will play a role in the upcoming miniseries has yet to be revealed." No, I'm sorry, that's not a solicit. That's part of an article I was reading.
Okay.
And that did happen. The Necrosha event brought Selene to the island, who reanimated the bodies of dead mutants all over the place. But Genosha was like a treasure trove of them. And she was reanimating them to hopefully reabsorb them and their mutant energies to feed her own strength. was a rather freakish event because while it resurrected a bunch of characters, it was very temporary. You know, Banshee was alive, he was dead again. I think I saw the body of Thunderbird running around, but I can't remember for certain. And this is the event that resurrected Doug Ramsey for the first time since the late 80s.
Who's that?
Doug Ramsey, Cypher.
Oh.
He was probably the most notable death of mutants prior to actually ever, really, because he was, you've seen him, his character his ability is to translate any language instantly.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you're talking about 80s storytelling, a lot of people didn't know what to do with him, so he's just kind of, he wasn't even the guy in the chair. He was just the guy that needed protecting by every other New Mutant because he wasn't a physical character. At one point, the New Mutants accidentally ended up in Asgard, and Doug ended up in a tavern in Asgard. So you can imagine what they thought when there's just like this, you know, the only way to walk out of here is to win your freedom. So they decided to give him something of his, a challenge of his level, and they shoved the chambermaid in front of him and gave her a sword.
Wow.
Then they gave him the sword, and he couldn't even lift it.
That's awesome.
So he ended up working in the kitchen of the tavern.
Poor Ego.
Yeah, he was not feeling himself in this place. He was when the X-Men finally rescued the New Mutants, he was very eager to go.
Dealing with the horde of undead mutants from Genosha in this miniseries, what's going to happen when some people have been resurrected, written into their undead selves?
Well, I don't know, because that's the question, is I don't know how many of these mutants have been logged by Cerebro. I mean, there are several things that I don't think CBR really fleshed out when they talked about this. I mean, there is the idea of undead mutants, which hasn't really been a new thing. It's happened a couple times in Marvel. But if you're talking undead mutants, does that mean you need Selene's help? She's currently helping run Krakoa. So do you need to drag her to this island that could technically feed her abilities and drive her into a mutant energy bender, for lack of a better term? And then there is the idea that if people can bring these mutants back in some way, let's say it is part of like the alien plot, if these mutants are up and active, does that mean Cerebro can get a read on them and possibly resurrect mutants it's never had a read on before? So this is kind of a three-dimensional problem. But I'm sure we'll find out about that come May. Meanwhile, Marvel's Batman is getting another series.
Marvel's Batman?
Yeah,
there were.
It's less literal than you think, because there is a very prolific hero in Marvel Comics that has multiple series, given most of their active times.
Is it the Man-Bat?
No, this is Peter Parker.
I'm a little confused.
Well,
walk me through this.
Like DC has so many Batman series, Marvel has so many Spider-Man series.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I was like, did you misspeak? Like Marvel?
No, I meant
Batman?
that. I meant that very purposefully. Peter Parker is kind of Marvel's catch-all when it comes to some of their problems. He's very physical. He's a genius level intellect. He's involved in a number of different events, whether as part of a team or just by himself. He's all over the place. Well, he's getting a brand new series from writer Joe Kelly and artist Chris Bocciolo. This one is being called Non-Stop Spider-Man.
Oh, man.
I kind of like the title, but it also sounds dangerous.
Yes.
It also sounds like he's just driving a very bad bus, but still. According to the series description, quote, Non-Stop Spider-Man will combine the pulse-pounding action Spidey is known for with even more pulse-pounding action. Prepare for the comic book ride of your life featuring Spidey's best villains and his most amazing feats, unquote. According to the writer Joe Kelly, he said in a statement, quote, Editor Nick Lowe has a superpower. He picks up the phone, calls me, and says the exact combination of words that'll make me want to drop everything and dive headfirst into the Marvel Universe. Last time, it was Spider-Man, Deadpool, Ed McGuinness. No-brainer! Yes! This time it was Spider-Man, non-stop, Chris Bocciolo. Again, yes! But non-stop? Unquote. It's a strange group of words. I'm still having trouble parsing it all out in my head.
I'm very fascinated by this by this title and wondering what's going to come at the end of this.
Well, Kelly actually expanded on that a bit. He said, quote, "Nonstop Spider-Man is, for me, the best of what Marvel Comics can be. Relentless action, epic storytelling, mind-melting art, and relevant themes, all grounded by the heart and soul of one of my all-time favorite characters, Spider-Man. Chris and I want to redline your adrenaline and shatter your hearts, giggling the whole time. Please sign your waivers and gather your safety gear of choice before issue 1 comes out. I truly can't wait for this. Buckle up, tigers," unquote.
Huh.
The first issue goes on sale in June.
I'm truly fascinated by this.
I am just interested in this idea. Is this basically all Spider-Man? It's like none of the Peter Parker parts of his life. It's just him going from one adventure to the next.
I mean,
Yeah.
I like the Peter Parker parts of his life.
Well, no, the Peter Parker parts of his life should be there. It's always been about Peter Parker. Spider-Man's always the mask.
Yeah, but he's got struggles as both Peter Parker and Spider-Man.
And that's the best part of the storytelling that revolves around this character is this balance act and how he can't.
Right, but I like that balance act because I think that's the only thing about comics that prepared me for real life is balancing multiple spectrums of life.
Are we going back to the Power Rangers?
No. I'm talking about like balancing professional life and personal life. I mean, it's very difficult.
Okay, well, if you're taking life lessons from Batman, you're already messed up, I think.
Spider-Man.
No.
Not much better, I know.
No, it really isn't, because the only difference is he can't afford the mansion.
I can relate to that too, though.
Well, the Star Wars canon is getting an adjustment from Lucasfilm and Disney.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, there has been an announcement just this past week of Star Wars The High Republic. It's going to be a new series of novels and comic books set 200 years before the events of The Phantom Menace. So we're very much pre-Skywalker era.
Mm-hmm.
The High Republic will be released in phases, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The first phase is being called The Light of the Jedi.
Yay.
The first book announced was Star Wars The High Republic Into the Dark by Claudia Gray. A Test of Courage by Justina Ireland. The High Republic Adventures by Daniel Jose Older. And Star Wars The High Republic by Cavan Scott. And finally, Star Wars The High Republic Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule. It's about time they really expanded on the Star Wars universe outside of the Skywalkers. I mean, they did that with The Mandalorian finally, and it was brilliant.
Yes, it was.
You know, it's amazing how much more expansive the Star Wars universe can get when you stop dealing with the same Force users over and farking over.
And their families, and their families' families, and their families' friends, and their friends.
And their families dating each other.
Don't get me wrong. I really, really like Star Wars. However, it needs to not be about the Skywalkers.
It was kind of amazing how they depicted the stories of Star Wars over 9 films happening across an entire galaxy, and it was the same dozen weirdos all the time.
Right? I mean, but I like the weirdos. They're my weirdos, okay?
What are the odds? Well, it appears that Iron Man 2020, as of this May, will be dealing with the Iron Man of the 1960s.
Really?
Yeah, for those that aren't aware, the Iron Man 2020 is not Tony Stark. It's his brother, Arno. Arno Stark stole...
Why?
Well, he stole designs of Tony Stark's in regards to a very powerful armor he created called the God Killer. And Tony Stark, after the second Marvel Civil War, managed to resurrect himself in a technological way. He basically booted an older copy of his mind as well as created a new body. I forget what happened to the prior one. More or less, at the end of the latest Tony Stark run of Iron Man, the current Tony Stark is having an identity crisis of sorts. He's facing the new broom conundrum we talked about with the Dawn of X. If it's a new brain and a new body, is it technically the same guy? And he believes himself to be an artificial construct. So, when he made this public admission, Arno Stark stepped in as the only, original genetic Stark left and took over Stark Unlimited. So now, this this current version of Tony Stark is reading an AI rebellion of sorts, because Arno Stark is very anti-AI for some reason. I think he believes we're heading towards a singularity and AI will take over and blah, blah, blah. But it appears that in May, in some way, Tony Stark is going to reassert himself as an individual and possibly regain control of Stark Unlimited. This is apparently beginning in May with Iron Man 2020 number 5 by Dan Slott, Christos Gage, and Pete Woods. It is the penultimate issue of the series. For those that don't like long words, it's the second to last issue in the series. So it appears...
I like long words.
Hey, I'm not everybody.
I'm a bibliophile.
But the solicit for Iron Man 2020 number 5 reads, quote, Tony Stark is back, but is it the real Tony? How is that possible? Where did that all-new armor come from? What's going on? There's no time to explain, human. Just know this. It's Stark versus Stark, round 2, as Tony takes Arno in space, unquote.
Sibling rivalry in space? Isn't that just Star Wars?
Well, no, because technically this would be more like Admiral Akbar fighting with Han Solo.
I still now want to see that.
My fault for planting images. I don't know, I've had a little trouble following Iron Man lately, not because it's been bad, but it just kind of fell down my list as newer characters popped up, and then there was this whole resurgence of the X-Men that got my attention, and you know how it is. However, we did speak for a little bit last week regarding the Union, a New England-based team in Marvel Comics. And thanks to a follow-up story, we have a little more information as to who is on this team and what they are. The team of the Union is going to consist of Union Jack, Snakes from Northern Ireland, Kelpie from Scotland, the Choir from Wales, and their leader, called the legendary Britannia. According to the writer, quote, 40 years ago, Roger Stern and John Byrne introduced a new Union Jack into the pages of Captain America. This is the comic I've been waiting 40 years to write. New heroes, new adventures, and a team that's falling apart before it's even begun. Unquote. The writer of this series is Paul Grist, and the artist is Andrea DeVito. And DeVito sounds like she spent a while thinking about this. She said, quote, I really like medieval themes. With Britannia and Kelpie, I wanted them to look like medieval warriors, and I just simplified and modernized it from there. For Snakes, I thought of the visual for the Executioner, someone the enemy will fear from just a look. And for the Choir, more of a light visual, something that can enable quick movements. On her knife, I put 3 dragons' heads. I know on Wales' flag they have a dragon with only 1 head, but I thought, why not 3? Unquote.
Why not 3?
Yeah, the Union will be a limited series of 5 issues hitting shelves in May. And just based on their design, I would really like this to be an ongoing.
It's called the Union?
Yeah, I'm intrigued by this crew. And having a little more information on them seriously helps my curiosity here. It's like finding out that the Scottish one, Kelpie, the one with the pink hair and the white and blue outfit, that may literally be what she's be. Kelpie in Scotland is a water spirit.
Yes.
Water horse, actually, that likes to drown people.
Snakes, I'm still trying to picture... I'm still trying to figure out the other 2 mysterious ones here, Snakes and the Choir. The Choir is evidently the one dressed like a modern rogue in the lower left. And
looking at picture.
And Britannia
yes.
in the center is very majestic. I would like to know her story.
Yes.
I also like to know if the sword and shield has any special connotations there. So, yeah.
You said it's coming out in May?
Yep. 5-issue limited series.
By which publisher?
Marvel.
Marvel.
We're still in Marvel news here.
Okay, I'm just writing it down so I remember next time I go to the comic book shop because I can never remember when I'm actually there.
Okay.
Writing it down.
Well, last up in Marvel comic news is a heck of a tribute issue, and it may be the first one I pick up in quite a while. Marvel Comics is going to recreate Giant Size X-Men #1 with 37 different artists.
Ooh.
Now, this is a tribute issue for Dave Cockrum, who is the artist of the original Giant Size X-Men, as well as a tribute to Len Wein, the writer of the book, who both of whom have passed away.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, the 37 artists will all be recreating separate pages and scenes from Giant Size X-Men #1, and they're pretty much overlaying it onto Len Wein's script. They're recreating the 1975 comic page by page.
That's pretty cool.
According to editor Jordan D. White, quote, "The artists were so excited to work on it because the art in this book inspired them all. Everybody involved loves this comic book and is doing amazing work. You have got to check it out," unquote. Would you like to hear a list of the artists that are now on this issue? I mean,
Yes, please.
I obviously don't have to tell you this illicit. This is the comic book that rebirthed the X-Men, brought in about a half dozen new characters, and turned them from a flailing franchise into a mainstay in comics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Get this. The artists associated with this are Alex Ross, Kevin Nolan, Chris Samney, Marcus Toe, Sia Ohm, Stefan Segovia, Marguerite Savage, Carmen Carnero, Bernard Chang, Aaron Cooter, Takeshi Miyazawa, Juan Cabal, Gurihiru, Mark Brooks, Chris Anka, Phil Noto, Valerio Schiti, Lanil Francis Yu, Matteo Lolli, Emma Lupacino, Carlos Gomez, Eben Coelho, R.B. Silva, Ramon Rosanas, Joshua Cassara, David Baldion, Marcelo Ferreira, Javier Heron, Rod Reese, Javier Rodriguez, Marco Cicchetto, Jen Bartel, Mike Del Mundo, Raza, Pepe Larraz, and Mike Hawthorne, with a special cover by Adi Grainov.
Wow.
My brain stopped at the first one, which was Alex Ross. Really?
He's doing a page in this as well, yeah. This Giant Size X-Men titled Tribute to Ween and Cockrum #1 goes on sale May 27th. Like I said, I'm not much for tribute comics, but yeah, this is in my wheelhouse. I'll be really interested to see how all these artists interpret this book. Any opinions? Because that was mind-melting for me.
I'm still processing. That's amazing. How?
I mean, I gather each of them is taking a page and reinterpreting it in their own way.
That's awesome. I can't wait.
I also wonder if there's something particular to this now. I mean, it's 1975 is when this first came out, so this is a 45th anniversary. Kind of an awkward year for something like this. Actually, I wonder if it has to do with this book being the first appearance of Thunderbird. He's one of the few mutants that has not been resurrected in any major X-Men line.
Really?
Really? They have.
Odd, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The guy has functionally been dead since about 1976. Never resurrected, been replaced by his younger brother in a few storylines, but he's never really come back.
He's shown up from here and there, and apparently, thanks to Sinister, his body's being used as his body.
Well, I know that, but the thing is, he hasn't shown up here or there. Alternative world versions of him have shown up, like What Ifs he's shown up, but he's never actually been back in Marvel canon. Ever.
Oh, I'm thinking about that one story you read about Jean Grey being resurrected by the Phoenix.
Oh, you mean Phoenix Resurrection?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that wasn't him, though. That was a construct.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, he showed up as a cook in that one. So, I don't know. That'd be the only guess as to why you would do this at this particular point. This seems like kind of a 50th anniversary thing, not a 45th. Then again, I could be way off. Next up, we have DC Comic News. This is where we talk about the other major company in comics and what stories and characters they have coming now and in the near future. DC had a major shift on Friday.
What happened?
I actually can't remember when Jim Lee came on, and he and Dan Didio have been co-publishers for DC Comics.
Oh, think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, Jim Lee is now the only publisher in DC Comics. Dan Didio, as of Friday, February 21st, is no longer with the company.
Really?
Yeah, the original report was actually broken by The Hollywood Reporter, which didn't have any additional details about the circumstances of his departure. There's a lot of speculation online that due to Didio not releasing a statement until this past Monday, they don't think it was voluntary on his part. They think he was forced out. But it's the internet. They also thought that the coronavirus came from bats, so... Dan Didio became VP of editorial at DC in 2002 before getting promoted to Vice President Executive Editor in 2010. Then he became DC co-publisher alongside Jim Lee. Didio is also actively writing OMAC, Superboy, and several other series. He was currently writing The Metal Men for DC. It's a miniseries. It's being illustrated by Shane Davis, and there's no word as to whether or not The Metal Men is actually continuing now that he's no longer around to write it. Didio himself released a statement on, February 24th, this past Monday. It was very short in a public Facebook post. And he said, quote, "Overwhelmed and humbled by the outpouring of love and support, and it leaves me at a loss for words. First time for everything. So instead, I'll turn to what was said nearly 5 years ago on April 10th, 2015, to best sum up how I feel. Love to you all," unquote.
Wow, okay. That's
Somebody
a
had
lot.
to sign an NDA.
It feels like it. I mean, even a former editor-in-chief of Marvel, Joe Quesada, responded to what was going on. And he said, quote, "While the world of comics likes to look at things in terms of heroes and villains, that's far from reality. I've known Dan Didio for years before he was at DC. We lived in different universes and competed for more years than I can remember. He's a good guy and has been a staunch advocate for our medium for nearly 2 decades. I want to personally wish him the best and look forward to all of his future endeavors and successes," unquote.
I am starting to believe there's something more involved that may not be well liked among the public.
I don't know.
come out?
I saw speculation from a few people who jumped on this story and said that DC, or Warner Brothers as his parent company, may not like where the new generation, the 5th generation, like the current, or the timeline to DC that is yet to be revealed, they may not have liked where it was going and preemptively fired him to be able to blame him for it later, which seems kind of odd considering the timeline hasn't been released and we don't know how anyone's going to accept it yet. So, I don't know. It could be a case where Warner Brothers actually got upset, like we were talking about, that DC has consistently lost market and dollar share in comic books to Marvel, and they were looking for a big change. However, and this is going to sound odd, but if I had to fire one of them between Didio and Lee, I probably would have fired Lee before I fired Didio.
Really? Because
Really?
Lee is practically synonymous with the company now.
He is, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Lee, but I've seen Lee's work as the head publisher for Wildstorm in a number of different versions, and a lot of what's happening in DC feels more like Lee's work than Didio.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm not saying Didio necessarily had the way forward, but if I was trying to find one, I think DC would be better sticking closer to its roots and taking any risky ventures at this point. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And Didio is definitely firmly in its roots. He's been there for 2 decades, largely in a VP capacity. So running the company will not be anything new to him. And again, I've seen Lee's work. As far as an artist, I think he's incredible. As far as a writer, he's not the best, but I've seen much worse. As far as the head of a company, Wildstorm was rebooted twice, during the period before and after it was bought out by DC Comics. And then when Lee became publisher, not long after that, we got the new 52, which wiped out prior DC continuity in favor of this new thing. So the whole reboots thing, I always kind of put that on Lee's shoulders because it feels like a very Lee move. So, and the new 52 just kind of mucked things up more than it really helped. So, yeah, I would have kept Didio while I was looking for another solution to DC's sales issues. I know, it sounds like an odd move considering I'm not a DC reader, but at the same time, it feels like the more important and mind-blowing stories came out under Didio's creative moves than Lee's. So that would have been where I put my money.
Mm-hmm.
There is one person, though, who said that AT&T will close down DC Comics if the 5th generation fails. And it's an artist I have trouble taking at face value. This man's name is Ethan Van Sciver. I take it that name is unfamiliar.
Yeah.
Okay, Van Sciver was an artist on my favorite DC comic story of all time. That's the Sinestro War in Green Lantern comics.
Oh, okay.
I thought it was a very bold series, and it took some major risks that really paid off. However, Van Sciver has also been known to make some very, for lack of a better word, supremacist and misogynistic statements online. He's one of those. There is one guy who was basically, I can't remember his name. I think I purged it. He would write YouTube commentaries online about how he thought Marvel ruined Captain Marvel by reducing the size of her bust and making her less sexy.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah, and Cyber would routinely agree with and defend this man online, if that tells you anything. But Van Cyver said online recently, quote, "Understand, it doesn't mean that the characters are going to go anywhere. Batman, of course, is a prized possession of AT&T now. AT&T is Batman, and they're going to keep putting stuff out, movies and product and toys and all that stuff. Comic books are dead, and they're going to close up the publishing house soon. I'll tell you that a professional who I spoke to recently said, yeah, I was talking to one of the higher-ups at DC Comics who said that if 5G doesn't work out, that's it. AT&T is closing the publishing arm. So this is ball game," unquote. I find that hard to believe because we've discussed that Batman is consistently in the top 10 selling comic books of every month. Closing the publishing because you don't like the timeline seems like you're really trying to say how much you hate your face by cutting off your nose. So to take a successful series and shut it down because you don't like other stuff, I don't know why you do that. That feels wasteful. Can DC stand to trim down if 5G doesn't work? Sure. I'm sure there's excess series they can cut down. Maybe all their characters can have one series instead of 4. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you kill it. I mean, these are some of the most recognizable pop culture properties in the world. People all over the world know what that bat symbol means. They know what that S symbol means. There's even a high number of people that know what the double W's and that Green Lantern symbol mean. You wouldn't just toss that aside.
No way.
The line could use a revamp, it can use a cleanup, but that's part of what the fifth generation is all about. You're trying to clean up the timeline so people know what to reference when they're going through their own history. Van Cyver also tweeted, quote, "We're watching the end of DC Comics happen in real time. 80 years of history. I can't believe it. If Didio is gone, replace him with Jeff Johns or go out of business. Effing hate to see this. I love DC Comics," unquote.
He's got a real defeatist attitude right now.
He does. And you know what? It wouldn't surprise me if AT&T, the owner of Warner Brothers, decide to sell DC Comics, but close it? That feels wasteful.
Yeah.
No, they would rather sell it.
Yeah, it's worth something.
It's still a cash cow.
It's still worth something. It's still making successful movies, and and I'm not going to say they're making the same worth as Marvel, but they are making money with these movies. They do work, So, yeah, I think Cyber's just being weird. The Flash Forward miniseries has ended. This is the miniseries that told the story as to what happened to Wally West after the Heroes in Crisis miniseries. And I don't quite know how to say this, because we saw it teased, but at the same time, it still freaks me out. Wally West has the powers of Dr. Manhattan now.
Yeah, that's a little terrifying.
It is, and it seems like he's better. He's dealing with things more. However, he's doing what Flashes tend to do when they have unimaginable power, and he's messing with things.
I was just going to say, messing with the timeline, like Barry Allen?
It's more positive than that, because he messed with it by a sliver. However, it's one of those slivers that restored is not the right word, because he basically took his life as it was and put it back, but he's not in it. I know, I just said something really dumb, and you're trying to figure out what I just said. So, we know that because of the differences between the New 52 and Rebirth, Wally West's life as he knew it no longer existed, right? His wife didn't know him. Iris? No. It wasn't Iris. What was his wife's name? Darn it. Linda Park. His wife Linda didn't know who he was, because he never really existed in the Rebirth timeline, right? And then because his wife never knew him before, his kids didn't exist. Jay and Iris. It was the sort of mental trauma that caused him to lose control of his powers and accidentally kill approximately a dozen superheroes in Heroes in Crisis. So the multiversal monitoring android called the Tempest Fugonaut took Wally West from his self-imposed imprisonment and needed his help cleaning up the dark multiverse for reasons that were kind of unknown. The sticking point was a planet that apparently was brought into creation by Wally West's own fears. It was his fears made manifest. However, the part I'm still having trouble wrapping my head around is that somehow, in all the multiversal nonsense that we've seen in the retcons, this world and multiverse, or dimension, made out of Wally West's fear, is where Jay and Iris West ended up. His kids. Now, I'm still trying to figure out how that works, but that's not here nor there. The thing that happened after West was given Metron's chair and the powers of Dr. Manhattan is that he used his abilities, his new reality warping abilities, mind you, to restore the memories of Linda Park pre-New 52, and then dropped his kids off on Earth.
I'm not sure I like that.
That's the thing I hit. It's the kind of ending that the character deserves. However, it feels so artificial. It's not a Flash solution. It's a Dr. Manhattan solution. And then I have a few questions that go along with this. Okay, so Linda remembers Wally and the kids. But she's still in the house that as far as I know, she's still single in. There's no space for the kids in it. Let alone, if this is Linda Park with her memories restored, does that mean she's still a younger version of herself who never actually gave birth but remembers having 2 kids? You guys see where I'm kind of... I know I'm overthinking this, but at the same time, these are questions I need answered.
These are really good questions.
This is not what I'm kind of groaning about. It feels very selfish, and it feels harmful to Linda Park.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, there's also the question as to Linda was excited at the end of this miniseries to see the kids. That's great. You know, for kids to be not unmade, but somehow banished for I don't know how long in this nightmarish dark dimension. Okay. However, does this also mean that Linda has 2 sets of memories that she somehow has to resolve? You know, could she accidentally end up resenting these kids because she remembers that these things just kind of popped into her life at a certain point? There's so many complicated facets to this, and I'm having trouble locking it down. And then there's the last question. These are Wally West kids. Are they still speeders? I realize you guys can't answer these questions, but I mean, I've read only parts of this miniseries simply because it didn't really click for me as a reader. But at the same time, now that all this has happened, it feels like there's a major amount of unresolved issues centering around the people in Wally West's life, regardless of whether or not Wally West is in it. So, go ahead.
I hope there's some longer game going on because the things they were doing to Wally West as a character just seems to be getting worse and worse.
Well, no, I mean, this is actually better for Wally because now he doesn't have the guilt of, surviving his family running around. However, it's such a slapdash solution to the issue. It doesn't really address the traumas that Wally's gone through, the joys of regaining his family, yet he's completely separated from them again. And then there's just the idea as to what the fallout are for a couple teenagers, at least one of which is still a super speeder, and now they have to grow up on a world that has their younger mother without their father. He'll probably come back eventually in a future storyline, but it seems to me at least enrolling these kids in school would be a nightmare. How do you explain where they've been? How do you explain how they exist? Seems to me the only people that are capable of teaching these kids, at least on a regular basis, would be other superheroes because they're the only ones that might possibly understand how these kids suddenly came into being. Again, I know I'm overthinking this, but at the same time, these are necessary answers. You can't just enroll them in public school. So, I don't... We could be here for half an hour discussing this realistically.
Yes,
Yeah.
really.
Further on in DC Comics, the cameo appearance of Punchline happened last week in Batman number 89. Sold out very quickly. Me personally, I didn't go to look for it because I understand it's the technical first appearance of the character. However, it was just her mouth in a single panel. Something tells me that the first appearance of Punchline in Hell Arisen number 3 is going to be more important, since it'll be the first full view of the character. Before that comes out, though, Punchline co-creator James Tynion IV revealed some of the backstory regarding this mysterious new character and what she may be about. He said, quote, "Since the start of the New 52, the Joker's operated solo. He hasn't had a gang, and he hasn't had henchmen. I started writing scenes where Joker had these clown-masked henchmen that were helping him do some really horrible things. And I realized, oh, I really love this dynamic, but there's a figure missing. And that figure that's missing is the chief henchman, the number 2 character. And obviously, Joker has one of the most iconic top henchmen of all time in Harley Quinn. With Harley now emancipated from the clown prince of crime, that raised the question in my head. If I want a new number 2 for the Joker heading into this big story, how can I create someone new who can be a great foil for the Joker, be a great foil for Batman, and be a great foil for Harley, who I was starting to realize would play a big part in my year? Sometimes at DC or any big creative corporation, when you want to throw a new idea in the mix, they want to kick the tires and test it out. Thankfully, with Punchline, there was an immediate energy to the idea, and everyone got behind her really quickly, so we were able to move really fast," unquote. The origin story of Punchline will ultimately play out, according to Tynion, in the Joker 80th Anniversary special. He was doing a story with Mikkel Janin where they will tell the origin story of the character. The 100-page Joker 80th Anniversary arrives in comic book stores on April 29th. Hell Arisen number 3, written by James Tynion IV and illustrated by Javi Fernandez, is set to appear in February, and February ends by Friday, so I imagine that means this week. I don't know, do you guys think it's important for the Joker to have a lead henchman?
Not really.
Even with Harley Quinn, she really wasn't much of the second in command. She is just the kind of first one to get ridiculed or whatever.
I can agree with that. She was more of a gun moll than a henchman.
Yeah.
I kind of hope Punchline is different in the fact that she seems to be more functional as a lieutenant. She is like the Joker's top mercenary rather than just something that hangs around and says something quippy. It would almost be a big difference. I mean, at this point, I'd almost like to see Punchline and Cassandra Cain get into a fight.
I can't say anything for sure. I would really want to know more about the character before I start tying her off to put her against versus battles against certain people.
Oh, I can understand that. As a matter of fact, Tynion decided to expand a little bit more on another thing he's working on in the Batman universe, and that's his take on the relationship between Batman and Catwoman. For those that are unaware, Tom King wrote an 85-issue run of Batman comics, and James Tynion took over as of issue number 86. Now, the Batman and Catwoman are in a committed relationship, although not married. And with Comics Beat, Tynion revealed how his take on the relationship would differ from King's. He said, quote, "It's difficult stepping into a run that has anchored itself on that relationship, especially knowing that there's another comic coming down the road that will continue the ideas of that relationship and carry them forward in a way that Tom was looking at." He's referring to Batman Catwoman number 1, coming out at an undetermined date. I definitely wanted to come at it from my own angle, which is why I wanted to explore the more villainous side of her. Not so much in the present day, but specifically the fact that in the early days of Gotham, she was running around with characters like the Penguin and the Riddler and the Joker. The idea that she would have been a part of some big schemes in the beginning. Back when the stakes were a little bit different in Gotham, so it's not like she did some deeply horrifying things that are going to shock Batman to his core, except for the fact that she still kept some of those things from him, unquote.
Well, we're going from that angle, yeah, because I don't really consider her a villain. She's definitely a criminal, but
I've considered her to just be a loose player.
yeah,
She doesn't
she
really
does her
fall.
own thing.
Yeah, she doesn't fall into hero or villain categories because she does very self-serving things, but even in the midst of those things, she's been known to save people from either their own impulses or other things happening in Gotham, even though it's not convenient.
Yeah, I was just kind of arguing his use of the word villain for Catwoman.
Yeah, and I do like some of the aspects he's bringing forth, though. The idea that even though Selina Kyle is fully committed to Bruce Wayne and Batman, she's still holding on to parts of her past. You know, and she would seem to me to be one of those characters that's highly secretive. She's just not going to talk about things she doesn't think are important. However, then again, it's like, it's almost unfair for Batman to, if he does, get down on Selina Kyle for her secrecy. I mean, how long has he had his secret? 80 some odd years now?
Yeah. I can imagine her, if he pulls that card, she's just gonna look at her and say, really, we're gonna play that game?
Yeah. Yeah. How many kids have you killed, by the way? Last up is our general comic and convention news. This is where we talk about comic books that are not Marvel or DC related, as well as conventions happening all around the world. And unfortunately, this is one of those weeks where we have to start off with a creator passing away. Comic book creator Nicola Cuddy, also known as Nick Cuddy, passed away on the 21st in Tampa, Florida. He was fighting cancer. He died at age 75. This was confirmed by sources close to the family. However, the exact details of his death have not been disclosed. It is reported that he was surrounded by family and close friends, including his daughter Jamie, his brother Emil, and his business partner Nakoma Demetro. Cuddy was born on October 29th, 1944. He served in the Air Force from 1966 to 72. During that time, his first comic strip was published in the French magazine Singular Plural, and his first story, Grub, was published in Creepy magazine. Cuddy is also known as the co-creator of characters such as Moonchild and the Starbase and E-Man. Cuddy worked on E-Man. It was a superhero series with his friend Joe Staten. He also helped create the characters Captain Cosmos, Brightstar, and Starflake the Cosmic Sprite.
Wow, he sounds very 80s.
Yeah, it does. It really does. Cuddy has been published by entities like Warren Publishing, Charlton Comics, Marvel Comics, and DC Comics. In addition to his own creations, Cuddy has had a hand in some very well-known franchises, including Vampirella and Popeye.
Really?
Yeah, he also worked side by side with Stan Lee, Wally Wood, and Bill Black. He was a two-time winner of the Warren's Ray Bradbury Award and a recipient of the Comic-Con International Inkpot. He also worked in the world of cartoons, serving as an animation background designer for projects like 101 Dalmatians, Gargoyles, and The Critic.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So I know when I said his name, a lot of people went, who? But he's actually been working in your favorite visuals for longer than you're aware.
Seriously.
Yeah. It's sad to hear that he's gone. It's another one of the creators, and I'm sad that I only learned his name because he died.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a guy that would have had some great stories about the industry. Speaking of the industry, San Diego Comic-Con news continues to drip out at this period. The third wave of special guests has been announced for San Diego Comic-Con. This week includes the writer of La Voz de Mayo and Tatarambo, Henry Barajas, the artist of underground comics including Gothic Blimpworks and Illuminations, Barbara Willie Mendez, the writer of Suicide Squad, Grimjack, and Star Wars, John Ostrander, the editor of Titan Books, Marvel, and Del Rey Books, Steve Saffel, the author of The Art of Racing in the Rain and the Clothing, Garth Stein, and a cartoonist in The Contradiction, Sophie Yano. Just like the prior 2 weeks of announcements, each of these guests will get a spotlight panel during the course of the Comic-Con weekend. I actually don't remember the dates of this year. But in addition to that, they will also be available for various signings and events that are happening during and around San Diego Comic-Con that particular weekend. I'm still looking forward to this year's Comic-Con. I don't know if this will be my last for a while. I think I've said that the last 3 years, but something keeps dragging me back, and it just makes me go, ooh, well, I gotta see that. And the worst part is, knowing San Diego Comic-Con, I'll probably say that every fucking year. It's true, man. There's always something every year that just makes you go, oh, don't want to miss. Gotta go. You know, it's always something that's off the wall. It's like one of the big things that happened was the creator of My Hero Academia coming one year, which was really odd considering he never went to Anime Expo or Fanime. He went to San Diego Comic-Con.
Wow.
Seems odd, doesn't it?
Yeah, we get some of the voice actors at our local conventions here.
Yeah, and
I don't know about the writers or anything.
it just always seems so odd to me that there's some really notable manga creators and debuts that go to San Diego Comic-Con. And when I discuss it with people, they're just like, well, why would they go to Anime Expo? I mean, that's their fan base. Yeah! Why wouldn't they go to Anime Expo?
Maybe they heard all the horror stories.
I know, and it's like, I'm not even saying they can't go to Comic-Con or they have to go to one or the other. They could go to both. But the really high-level creators always go to San Diego Comic-Con and seem to skip Anime Expo. That just seems really odd to me. So, I mean, between this and Akira Toriyama, it's like, I don't get why they just skip their notable, very voracious fans for another group of fans that know them about as well, but at the same time are not in their wheelhouse.
I can't speak for the guy who made My Hero Academia, but Akira Toriyama is kind of a troll.
A troll? I don't know. I've heard he's a recluse.
He is literally a troll, even in his own comics, in his own manga.
I've heard he's more of a recluse. He's not a fan of large crowds. But who knows? Well, actually, there's a crossover I never expected to hear about, but I guess the more I think about it, the more sense it makes. IDW Comics and DC Comics are teaming up for a Sandman and Lock and Key crossover. This is happening...
I don't know.
Sorry?
No, go on.
Okay, this is happening in October for a crossover of Neil Gaiman and Joe Hill and Gabriel Rodriguez's notable properties. It's being called Lock and Key, Hell and Gone, a Sandman Universe crossover event. It was announced by IDW Comics via Twitter on Saturday morning. There's not much else known about it at this point.
I don't know enough about either titles to really care.
Sandman is a very, very psychedelic type of trip where a lot of the aspects of sleep, or the things that happen when we're unconscious, seem to have different avatars to them. Lock and Key is much easier for me to grasp. Lock and Key is like a thriller pseudo-horror comic where there is a family that finds out that part of their heritage is a group of magical keys, each of which have a different power and aspect that can be... They're neutral items. They can be used for good or bad as easily as whomever is holding them. And they have some really off-the-wall abilities. Like one key you put into a lock, and it can open to any door that you've seen previously in your lifetime. There's another one that if you insert in the back of someone's neck, it can kind of open their mind for viewing.
I don't know.
In a three-dimensional plane.
The combination of these two titles, given their basic premise, makes me feel like they might be fighting Freddy Krueger.
Well, I mean, he wasn't mentioned in the crossover, and I think somebody else owns the comic rights to that. But there is a lot of synergy between these two series. It's just, I guess it's a matter as to how well their creators, or whoever's writing this, can fuse the two together for a story. Therein is the question. I doubt it's being written by Neil Gaiman or Joe Hill and Gabriel Rodriguez. There's probably a third party that's writing it. And it's going to be on them, I would say. Dynamite Comics has a creator that, well, he has an interesting view on politics and current culture. The owner of Dynamite Comics and Dynamic Forces, Nick Barrucci, gave a keynote speech at the Comics Pro annual meeting, and he agreed to share that speech for those who weren't there. And it is a very long speech, but more or less, he has major issues with cancel culture and the retail minority that are allowed in the equivalent of keyboard cops, as he put it.
Good alliteration, but explain?
Okay, well, cancel culture is the nature of people who have a disagreement with something or someone and they just decide to stop buying a particular product or products associated with them. The retail minority that are allowed in the equivalent of keyboard cops, I assume he means internet people and their opinions? The entire speech is up here, and it is probably about 8 pages worth of text, and I think we can all agree, I don't have time for this.
We don't have time for this.
Yeah. It's just a case of, you know, it's like we've discussed, it's the internet. It's too easy for people to post opinions on the internet, so why take it as seriously? It also seems kind of odd that given how many negative things people say about comic book publishers, they're still putting out comics, so why would that be a serious concern for you? You know what I mean? It's not like everything Marvel and DC does automatically has people getting flowery for it on the internet. There's more complainers there than anything else. Comics are still being sold.
Yeah. I mean, as many people as are, complaining about comics for one reason or another, there's just as many people, if not more, who are just too stubborn to say, no, I like my comics.
Oh yeah, how many people complain about event comics in both stores and online, yet those are the top sellers in a given month? They're still being bought. Just relax. I mean, people are going to air their grievances in whatever little ways they can, but it's not about people airing their grievances, it's whether or not you're entertaining people. If you're doing it right, then it doesn't really matter.
Fair point.
The author of Goosebumps, R.L. Stine, has a new graphic novel coming out. It's being called Just Beyond Welcome to Beast Island. Stine is writing it with art by Kelly and Nicole Matthews, lettering by Mike Fiorentino, and a cover by Julian Totino Tedesco. Graphic novel scheduled to come out in October of 2020. The storyline is two children, Carla and her little brother Benny. They accompany their uncle on a scientific journey to study mysterious species on a remote island. Then they discover that there's something deadly living on the island, which a lot of the locals know as Beast Island. According to Stine directly, quote, "Swamp monsters are a horrifying thing to me. They rise up from the murky depths, bringing nothing but terror. With this story, I hope readers will feel like they are watching one of those timeless, old-fashioned horror movies that make everyone shudder and scream," unquote. This appears to be put out by a Boom Studio subsidiary called Kaboom. I believe it's their young adult line. With that article, I think I'm finally starting to understand some of Stine's writing. He's very consistent in his love of horror, but I've always tried to understand why it seems to be the only thing he does. And he just strikes me as one of those kids that enjoyed, jumping out of his skin every now and again.
Yeah, maybe it's just his preferred method of writing.
Everybody has a comfort zone. I just wasn't aware if this was his, and now I'm finally getting a window as to what is.
He's also synonymous with, young adult horror fiction.
Mm-hmm. Well, we discussed before the odd crossover between the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Uh-huh.
Which has created possibly one of the most horrific images in all of comic books of the Shredder powered up with the Dragon Zord gem and is able to morph into a hybrid between the Green Ranger uniform and his own standardized armor, right?
Right.
Well, we've also discussed what the apparent countermeasure is as the Rangers are losing their abilities to morph, in that they needed to find backup, which they apparently found in the form of 4 green teenagers carrying ninja weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And April O'Neil.
Yeah. And thanks to the cover to Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 4 by Dan Mora, I now get to see what Turtles and Ranger costumes look like.
I'm actually curious who got what.
You know what? It's pretty savage looking, actually. Take a look at those Turtles in the Ranger costumes. It's an interesting hybrid look they have there.
Oh, that is fascinating.
Isn't it, though?
Mine's still loading.
Basically, the Turtles are representative of several of the primary colors, but at the same time, it's been adapted so that their shells are now gold, similar to the Dragon Shield, and the Ranger belts have been adapted to the belts that the Turtles generally have as leather harnesses.
Okay, I like that.
It's a pretty bold look.
I was definitely sure they're going to give Donatello the blue one. I wasn't sure about anyone else.
Donatello's not the blue one. That's Raphael.
Rob? I thought he was the red one with the size.
No. No, I'm pretty sure the red one is...
Look at the red one's weapons. It's a 3-pronged dagger.
3-pronged... I don't see a 3-pronged dagger. All I see is the blaster on his belt.
That's what...
Well, I guess that's a sword, but I'm pretty sure Raphael is under the blue there because it looks like the spear has been transformed into a double-sided sai.
No, that's how it's always been.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Donatello's in the black back there.
No, those are swords in his hands.
Donatello? He's carrying a long staff back there. In the black.
Oh, wow, we're all kinds of confused here.
Yeah, I don't know who has what.
I could definitely say Michelangelo got the yellow one.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Oh, yeah. It's an interesting image, and I'd like to see how it shakes out. I still haven't sat down to read it yet. I've picked up a couple issues, and I've got them sitting in my collection there.
You know, I was pretty sure Raphael was the red one, Donnie was blue, and Leonardo got the black coin.
Oh no, that's Leonardo in the blue. That's Raphael in the red and Donatello in the black. That's what's going on there.
I still think that's a sword in his hand in the back, but
It's not. That's Donatello's staff wrapped up and with something extra added to it, and that's Leonardo in the blue. It's got Leonardo's over-the-shoulder harness there. Well, one of Dynamite Entertainment's biggest properties is Vampirella, and a rather known comic book writer, Christopher Priest, has actually added to it by adding several characters, including Pantha, Chastity, and Draculina, and Nyx. They are vampires led by a character named Lilith with a mysterious sixth member, and they fight evil around the world. It's going to be a new title called The Sacred Six. The main story is going to be colored by Mohan, lettered by Willie Schubert. Let me see. It's being drawn by Jay Lee. I'm having trouble figuring out how I feel about it, only because this group of vampires dresses in ways very similar to Vampirella in that it's extremely minimalist.
Mm.
You know, if you're out there listening to this and not sure about what Vampirella is, she is a vampire from an alien world. I forget the name of that world. I think it was Draculon. I think. But she always appears in this red one piece, which can best be described as 80s French swimsuit wear.
Yeah.
And this group, with the exception of one of them, all appears to be dressed very similarly. I can't identify any one character among the others. I've never been much of a Vampirella fan or reader, but the imagery of Vampirella is very apparent. I sent an image so y'all can look at it. There's only one character that's even wearing something approximating pants. So, I don't know. If you got any opinions, I'll feel free to hear it. I just can't say that this is for me.
there's reasons why I never picked up this title. This is too much.
I'm not familiar with it.
I was a fan of Vampirella's redesign about 6-7 years ago, but of course that didn't stick. A lot of people thought she wasn't nude enough in those photos.
Wow.
All I can say is the one with the collar is probably close. Is probably the closest approximate to what Vampirella was wearing.
Yeah, I mean she was wearing that just in red, more or less, as a primary.
Yeah.
Mm.
Joanna, I take it you aren't familiar with Vampirella's proposed redesign a while ago.
No, I mean I've heard the name in passing, but I have no idea. I'm not familiar with the title at all.
Okay, the redesign, in my opinion, was special because it honored everything about the character without being beholden to it. And it was, I'm not going to say revolutionary, but somebody put some serious thought into it. I tracked it down, and I'm going to post it for you. But you can see the difference here in that she was mostly clothed. It was highly functional and still stylistic. And I'm kind of surprised it didn't stick.
That's a lot more clothing than I expected.
You want to show her the original?
That. Oh no, I know what the original looks like.
Yeah, most comic book readers know Vampirella on sight, even if they don't know the story. I liked the redesign. It was almost like Vampire Slayer-ish.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, a lot of people complain that this is not the Vampirella they know, therefore it must go away. I'm disappointed in that.
Mm-hmm.
There is going to be an Umbrella Academy spin-off series coming soon called Seance. Dark Horse announced that this is coming from co-creators Gerard Way and Sean Simon, illustrations by I.N.J. Coolbard with others. The spin-off is going to center on an 18-year-old character named Seance as he tries to make his way in Hollywood after being expelled from the Umbrella Academy. The story is set about 10 years before the events of Apocalypse Suite, the first story in the Umbrella Academy series. It's going to see Klaus forced to depend on himself after crossing a vampire drug lord. This sounds like a very 90s story. Gerard Way expressed his excitement to work on this. He said, quote, "For a long time, I'd wanted to tell the story of Klaus Hargreaves' life after the Umbrella Academy disbanded. I imagine a pretty wild decade for Klaus, full of ups and downs, seedy places, supernatural excursions, and internal battles within himself." Unquote. You Look Like Death is scheduled to be released this summer, June 17th. 6-issue miniseries with cover art by Coolbard, Gabriel Ba, Leo Romero, and Jenny Frisson. I don't know. After reading the original Umbrella Academy comic, I think the comic's way more entertaining than the TV series.
Can't say I was fond of either one.
Yeah, everybody has their own opinions. Not saying mine is good or bad. I couldn't really take the TV series. The comic book was funny to me. I thought the comic book kitsch was just way more enjoyable. Robot zombie Gustav Eiffel, of course.
Huh.
Yeah, I know. Last up in general comic and convention news, there is a new one-shot coming from Boom Studios regarding the Power Rangers comics. Joanna, I think this one's going to be of special interest to you.
Oh?
It's written by Ryan Parrott and illustrated by Dan Mora. It's titled Power Rangers Ranger Slayer #1.
Ooh, it's about the Ranger Slayer.
Yep, it's going on sale this June from Boom Studios. According to Boom Studios senior editor, Daphne Plebin, quote, Power Ranger Slayer #1 brings us to the very personal and shocking aftermath of the events of the Shattered Grid for one of the all-time fan favorites, Kimberly Hart Ranger Slayer. The consequences of Kimberly's choices during Shattered Grid and in this issue are so shocking that nothing will ever be the same again for those who inhabit Lord Dracon's universe, unquote. Evidently, she's going to try and prove herself as a hero, and in the process, this version of Kimberly is going to be facing off against an old foe in a new form. And it leads to a stunning choice that, quote, no Power Rangers fan can miss, unquote. I admit to curiosities about this. I have not read Shattered Grid, but I like how they're presenting this one-shot.
So it's just a one series or one issue?
A one and
or
done,
is it like a mini series?
a one-issue story. Yeah, it's a one-shot series.
Huh.
I don't know if this is going to be a prequel as to how she ended up as a Ranger Slayer, or if this is her returning to her home universe to find the world not quite as fixed as she left it. Either one is possible, really. So, I may check this out just for giggles. The subject of this week is Transformers Galaxies 1 through 4. This is a new series that came out from IDW starting in 2019 that was supposed to tell some offshoots and interesting stories from the Transformers universe that Hasbro is building. The first 4 issues are described as a Year 1 style story for the Constructicons, a fan-favorite group of original Transformers. It's written by Tyler Blasinski, with art by Livio Ramondelli, letters by Tom Long, edited by David Marriott and Tom Waltz. And I gotta admit, going in, I had high expectations on this particular story. It didn't quite meet all of my expectations, but by the time I was done reading, I was more than satisfied with what they were trying to do.
I agree.
It took a little while to get used to artistically. Livio Ramondelli, it's kind of hard to describe because his artwork is very static. There's not a good sense of motion from panel to panel.
Yeah.
But it's very atmospheric. I mean, when these characters were feeling down on themselves or even angry, there was something very special that came across in the art. You could feel the emotion coming off it, if not the energy.
This is kind of surprising since a lot of them don't have mouth plates.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And it's also a case where these designs, although they're pre-Earth designs, these are like the original Cybertronian forms of these characters. They were still very square and very recognizable as like the original designs of all 6 of these Constructicons. So there wasn't much difficulty telling them apart. It kind of amazed me how much I started to empathize with these characters towards the end of the story, though. They'd really gotten a raw deal through really no fault of their own.
Mm-hmm.
They were attempting to do the job that was given to them by Autobots, and they did it too well, unfortunately, and then a mysterious object gets thrown into the mix, and then everything just kind of goes straight to Gobotron, for lack of a better term.
I was going to say goes sideways, but that works too.
Oh, it's kind of a fear of the unknown that's being played because the thing that they got that made them so much better at their job was unknown and has apparently a myth to it.
Well, it wasn't something that anyone was supposed to have. I mean, the first parts of this story started kind of dark because the Constructicons are finishing an Energon processing station on a distant moon. And I say distant because it's close enough where they can see Cybertron as a speck, but not close enough where they can see it as a planet.
Mm-hmm.
And they are in haggard shape. They are apparently running on very low Energon reserves constantly, by design. Nobody wants them to be fully charged after something that happened previously, and this is where the flashback begins, where the Constructicons are newly made. They were apparently just made not long ago. They've chosen their profession as builders, and they decided to help rebuild the capital city of the Autobots on Cybertron, known as Iacon. And I gotta say, I was getting bad vibes from the one known as Termagax.
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
She's brand new.
She's relatively new to the Transformers universe. It's just that name, Termagax. It sounds like something you use on a cockroach. It also sounds like the type of name that's associated with a character that is very likely to either betray and or kill you.
Well, seeing as how she has ties to the Constructicons as well as Megatron.
Well, I mean, she was Megatron's teacher, evidently, but there's just something about the character and her demeanor that says betrayal to me. I mean, she was pushing the Constructicons in such a way that it seemed very similar to a lot of Decepticon leaders. She was trying to get something out of them and really didn't care about the potential consequences of it.
I don't think she was getting some out. She was just pursuing a thought without regards to the consequences. I'm not sure she was out for anything out than to satisfy her curiosity.
Well, I mean, I knew we were in rough shape when early on in this series, Wheeljack is the voice of reason. And Wheeljack, depending on which version you're talking about, it's like in the original Generation 1 stuff, he was kind of the mad inventor of the Autobots. He would try anything, and there was no concern of safety. He would just do it. When you're talking about some of the later cartoons, he was a warrior extraordinaire who wouldn't listen to anybody. He was just a lone wolf on his own. And in this particular series, he's back to being an inventor. He's an engineer of sorts. However, he is the one going, maybe we should slow down. And that to me was a huge red flag.
So I'm not really familiar with his character either.
I'm very familiar with his G1 interpretation, the original one. I've seen iterations of his letter one of being a lone wolf kind of character, but I really didn't think that was the same character.
Not literally, but I mean, he had a different function, but it's the same name and same form, more or less.
Yeah.
Yeah, Wheeljack has always been kind of devil-may-care regardless of what profession he has. So when this character is the one saying, wait, we're doing something wrong, you really ought to listen. But the Constructicons early on, they're egotistical, but they're pliable. They have a purpose. They want to do well. They're people pleasers, it really seems like.
Not all of them are egotistical, but yeah, a good majority of them are.
They all feel very high on what they're capable of doing. The only one that isn't high on ego, really, is Scavenger, who has a massive inferiority complex.
He seems like a weasel.
He's not a weasel. Yeah. Weasel implies he's going to backstab people. He's not even a backstabber. He's just so desperate to be seen. Yeah, he's desperate to be seen as an equal to everyone else.
I see more of the only term I could come up right now is probably a coward, but I'm pretty sure that's too strong.
No, he's just desperate to be seen as one of the guys.
Yeah, I didn't think Longhaul was that egotistical, but then in the end, he is. I can get behind what he is saying.
Well, he's the one that kept saying, you can't lift this stuff without me, which is true, but at the same time, it's like, calm down, dude.
But he's also the guy who, he's running their logistics, too.
A little bit.
Their muscles.
Most of them are muscles.
But early on in the project of rebuilding Iacon, Scavenger is sensing some strange energy waves coming from beneath the surface. Bone Crusher is employed to blow a hole into a bulkhead so they can get to whatever the heck it is. And they just recover this object and bring it back to Termagax, and she identifies it as the Enigma of Combination, a device that lays down a source code that allows Transformers to join together into a Gestalt form, a larger combined form. Except it's called an Enigma because it seems like nobody really knows where this thing comes from. And that's...
I don't think that's why they called it an Enigma, but...
That's what I gather from the dialogue, is that one of the reasons it's called an Enigma is because no one understands it. I mean, they don't know where it came from, really.
Well, it's from one of the primes, I know that, but no, I think it's called the Enigma because they're not entirely sure how it allows bots, whatever transporter comes across it, to bond in that manner.
Oh, they do. She lays out that it has a source code in it that allows them to combine consciousnesses and form. They do know how it works. They just don't seem to know its origins. It's one of those things, though, that's too much of a catch-all.
Yeah, I was wondering if it was just supposed to be like a red herring or if it actually has a significance.
No, this is the source of all combiners in this lore.
Well, it is now.
Okay.
I mean, the Enigma of Combination as a concept debuted, I want to say somewhere around 2015. Before then, combining transformers were either a function of convenience, some characters were just kind of compatible, or it was a function of form. The original story of the Constructicons was that Megatron made them on Earth and designed them as the first group of robots that were able to combine into something larger. In this case, it seems like this Enigma was made as a storytelling device so that certain characters could combine if their motivations were aligned, more or less, or if their purposes were aligned.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that simplifies things a little too much for my liking. It's kind of like the Speed Force. It exists, therefore we're going to use it.
I think it's a lot better than
pulling
out conveniences that this is why they can combine. At least there's a centralized reason why now.
And I always wondered if they could do that because of what do you call it, Voltron and Power Rangers and stuff like that, like the mechas turning into bigger ones. I kind of always played with the idea in the back of my mind, like I wonder if that would be possible, but nobody actually answered that until I read this.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, but this is also the part where Termagast convinces them to use it so that they can combine and finish their work faster. And, of course, I mean, if you know anything about these characters, you know what's coming, even though it doesn't have a name yet. And it's hard to control, and it shows off some impressive power. But at the same time, when Termagast looks at this thing after they take their first actions in their combined form, and then she just kind of muses, and I'm paraphrasing here, that went way better than the last time someone did this. That thing was crazy. That's when Wheeljack has to ask, wait, what thing was crazy? What are we talking about? And she explains that the last time the Enigma was seen was when 5 other robots who didn't have a combined purpose used it to come together, and they formed this abomination, which, if you know enough about Transformers lore, you can recognize the profile of Abominus, and it just kind of rampaged across the world until it was eventually defeated, broken down, and the Enigma was lost. That's one of those cases where, wait, you knew this could happen, and you asked him to do it anyway? There's something very crazy about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how long the various parts of Abominus were created before they decided to use the Enigma, and she allowed 6 relatively new life forms to use it in such a way. You don't see the problem here?
She seems like a person who is very curious about a lot of things, and consequences be damned.
I really would not be surprised to find out that in the main Transformers comics that IDW is putting out, that Termagax has a big Decepticon symbol. She is way too haphazard.
Admittedly, that name was brought up in that series we did read. I wasn't sure where that name came from. It was a brand new name.
They were always discussing the name in that volume in the past. I got the feeling she died a while ago, or at least disappeared.
Yeah, I had a feeling she was going to get killed in this series, thanks to Devastator.
Yeah, but, Termagax convinces Wheeljack to allow the Constructicons to keep using the code of the Enigma to combine, and eventually they seem to get a relatively solid control over it. I mean, Iacon came together way faster than it should have. And, of course, towards the end of the first issue, we still haven't seen how the rebuild of Iacon went, but as the Constructicons are discussing and lamenting about being taken away from Cybertron, or taken off of it, is when you see towards the end of the first issue, they're being watched by another figure who's relatively notorious when it comes to Transformers fans.
I wasn't outright familiar with the face immediately. It reminded me of something I saw in the old Dreamwave comics, but...
Oh, it looked a lot like Bombshell to me. I couldn't mistake that.
Yeah, again, I think it has something to do with all the saturated colors. I couldn't tell.
The coloring, though, was one of the best parts about this book. Like I said, it's very atmospheric. It puts you in the moment, and it really helps bring the emotions across in these wild color shifts. It was the colors were almost more expressive than the characters a lot of the times. But the first issue was an interesting introduction. The second issue is when things started to get kind of heavy for everybody involved. And it was also our first full view of the current version of the Insecticons. But that's for a later time. Going back to the current place of the storyline in Mayalx, where the Constructicons are finishing up construction of the Energon relay station, Scrapper is overseeing the training of the other Constructicons in hand-to-hand combat.
Or at least Scavenger and Longhaul.
Well, no, it's Scavenger and Longhaul versus Bone Crusher.
Yeah, I had to laugh at this a bit.
Yeah, Bone Crusher is aggressive, to say the least. But he's also physically strong. I guess he's just feeling good about being able to hit something after they've been idle for so long, after finishing the Energon relay, and still not being recalled to Cybertron. Or at least not allowed to come back.
Oh, admittedly, so Longhaul's also physically strong too, but he's not trained for combat.
Yeah, but this is like a fully fleshed out origin for these characters. When Scrapper is discussing all the things he tried before he settled on construction and engineering, it's kind of surprising to find out how well comparatively trained he is. You know, he's had combat training, he's had security training, defensive training, engineering. He tried a number of things, which it's kind of the first time anyone's explained why, for the first time, one of these Gestalt characters has a leader that is the foot of this thing. Usually the leaders are always what makes up the torso and the head. But at the same time, Scrapper's the only one that actually has multidiscipline awareness. He knows how to do a number of things, and he can teach it to the others.
And Hook is too high up on himself.
Yeah. Hook definitely sees himself as the end-all, be-all of everything. But the Constructicons are slowly starting to steal energy from the waste sections of the tower so that they can try to power up fully. Now, after this is when we get a view of the Insecticons, who are just devouring what's left of another Cybertronian that they've happened to capture.
I think either they captured or it's a corpse. I'm not entirely sure. I think it's a corpse.
Well, either way, it's kind of surprising that in addition to the Constructicons getting an origin and purpose, the Insecticons got something almost equally impressive in this series.
And I was like, that makes a whole lot of sense for their existence.
Yeah, in the original cartoon, they were just devourers. They ate everything without apparent purpose other than the fact that them eating things happens to create openings for other things to come through. They kind of deconstruct defenses one bite at a time. Whereas in this new comic book version, the reason they eat just indiscriminately is that they have a unique ability to take whatever matter they eat and then turn it into highly charged and conductive energy, or energon.
Oh, okay.
They are mobile recyclers.
Mm-hmm. But it also gives them a good purpose because, before, like I said, they just ate endlessly without any sort of purpose behind it other than gluttony. Now they do it as an impulse, and unfortunately, the other thing they figured out is that the closer to alive their food is, the more pure the energon result, as well as the higher the buzz they get.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting.
It is.
It's a nice twist on the lore that even like prior versions of IDW and Dreamwave never really figured out for these characters. They just existed. The best thing that anyone ever figured out up until this point was that there's a lot of them, and they tend to eat things.
Yeah. Makes for great cannon fodder in video games.
Yeah.
I guess.
Bombshell's introduction to the Constructicons was really forward. When he just kind of dropped down into the arena they're training in and then burrowed into the sand. That was like horror movie stuff. You almost expect like a mutated version of Kurt Russell to start walking around in there. But instead of attacking them directly and attaching cerebro shells, which Bombshell classically has been used to control people directly, he's actually trying to convince them to do what he needs them to do. He's playing on their insecurities and their fears of being ousted from Cybertron to force them to do something that they only kind of thought about but never really wanted to engage in. And that is recombining and just letting whatever this new personality is run loose.
Yeah, because what could happen?
Therein is the question.
Admittedly, after reading this thing, I find Dynamite the irony in their combined name as well as their name of their team.
Well, it's not just that level of irony. It's the it's the newness of it all, because Transformers often come out in just static forms, and what I mean is there is no child version. They just come out in whatever form they are.
Yeah.
It's kind of easy to overlook that comparatively the Constructicons are pretty much the Cybertronian equivalent of teenagers at this point in their development. They know what they can do, they're fully capable of it, but everyone keeps telling them that a lot of what they can do, they shouldn't. Specifically, the combination. And that's got to be frustrating when you have access to all this power and everybody above you keeps telling you it's not worth it, you shouldn't do it, and then they just kind of punish them for being themselves. Or not even being themselves, being the thing that other people force them to be. I mean, you got to admit, if it wasn't for Termagax, they wouldn't have ended up banished eventually. But Termagax was in such a hurry to have Iacon built, she convinced him to use the Enigma, which birthed Devastator, which had a short rampage towards the end of the building of Iacon, which required one building to be completely rebuilt. And it scared Wheeljack that as Devastator was breaking apart this tower, it was smiling at them.
Yeah, if they're teenagers, Devastator is like a child.
Devastator would be teenage angst given voice.
Oh, that's scarier.
It's almost literally what it is. But everyone is pleased with the results of the Constructicons rebuilding at the end, but still, they gave him a BS assignment on a far moon as both a punishment, or as both glory and punishment. Because yes, they have rebuilt something amazing and they have the capability to do it elsewhere. Except, when they finish that job, no one allows them to come back home to Cybertron. They were just given like a silent middle finger.
Wow.
It's almost sad when you think about it. Yes, they turned out to be villains, but they could have been so much more if they were just treated fairly from the beginning.
I mean, they're machines. Are they really going to be fair?
They're not really machines.
They're sentient beings.
They're metallic-based life forms, but something that IDW has introduced that Hasbro's really latched onto is that they've gone beyond the simple ideas that these characters were birthed in. When Marvel Comics first wrote their origins, the concept of good and evil in the 80s was a pretty black and white idea.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there were good guys, there were bad guys. There's Autobots, there's Decepticons. In IDW Comics, both parties represent the extremes of both sides of the coin. You know, obviously the Decepticons are the ones that believe more in kind of a nihilism or atavism. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They rebel against all sorts of order and control. But the reason they exist is not because they just exist for evil's sake. It's because the Autobots in their extreme are the ultimate control. When they ran Cybertron, it was a high-end bureaucracy with a major political and even like shadow machine running behind it that was forcing things to do things they didn't want to do, jobs they didn't want to take, forms they didn't want to take. And if you disagreed with it, to make sure that you couldn't speak out against them, not only would they implant new ideas in your head, but they would take away your face. Mm-hmm. So you couldn't speak these ideas.
They basically are standing for individuality and free will, and they don't want to be told what to do. They want to choose what to do on their own.
Well, it's kind of a double-sided coin for both sides, because whereas the Decepticons' name used to be because they're deceivers, now it's because they're fighting against the deceptions of the Autobots, who are the representatives of not freedom, but an autocracy.
Mm-hmm.
I know, it sounds way complicated. I think I may be overdoing it a bit, but that's the basic concepts we're dealing with here. And the lines between the factions has really been blurred. Instead, you're forced to follow individual characters instead of the factions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what a lot of these represent. It's like, even though Termigax is an Autobot, her control over things is very haphazard. Even though the Constructicons are technically Decepticons, they are that way because they were betrayed by the people who were supposed to be looking out for them. And all they want is the freedom to be what they want to be. They probably would have been builders if somebody hadn't convinced them to use the Enigma of Combination.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this weird, like, duality in this story that really just, it hit me anyway.
I like that. It really, it does enlighten what I, again, in the previous, things I've seen of Transformers, which has generally always been a black and white affair.
Yeah, and the last issue of this series, even though it was a full 22 pages, it was surprisingly simple. The Insecticons want the Constructicons to rampage. They gave them enough energon to fully power up and convince them to recombine into their Gestalt form, except they convince the Constructicons to allow the personality that comes up when they combine to not take control, but at least follow its impulses. If it wants to destroy, let it destroy. If it wants to rampage, let it rampage. And they let it work over the Energon station they've already built, as well as a large amount of this moon, killing pretty much everything on this moon that isn't the Insecticons or themselves. And the idea wasn't just to rampage for rampage's sake or to just plain turn them evil. The idea was to let them follow their basis impulses so that the Insecticons can eat whatever remains, be it the station or other Cybertronians, to create a store of energon large enough to run an army on behalf of Shockwave. And it's the fourth issue that really ties it all together, because now you see why the Insecticons have been driving the Constructicons so hard to do this. Not simply because they're trying to make better warriors, but because the Constructicons are convenience at this point. They're a means to an end, and at the same time, you also get 7 or 6 capable soldiers with this 7th monstrous form if you can convince them to see your way. It's almost like they are... Getting the Constructicons in Devastator was a happy accident on the way to another plot. Which made the whole thing even more Machiavellian in my eyes. And it really makes Bombshell into this fearsome character that he can so fully convince these 6 characters to do what he needs to do without ever showing them what he wants from them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to... This just kind of furthers my theory that Bombshell was the one that was turned into Cyclonus in the 2nd generation. A lot of people think it was Thundercracker. I don't think Thundercracker was that bright. There was an eye roll segment for me in the middle of this 4th issue, though. When Devastator starts his attack, he yanks the anti-aircraft turret off its moorings and then just holds it up like a rifle.
I didn't roll I just laugh.
I just got... My first thought is, wait, you built a handle into this thing even though you didn't know you were going to do this?
It doesn't look like he's holding anything. He's holding what's left of the mounts. If he knows that there's wire coming out of the bottom of his hand.
I suppose that's true. It was just still too weirdly convenient for me. I mean, it was even in his color scheme.
Yeah. I just love it that his rifle is an anti-air cannon.
The last image of Devastator smiling with that half a Cybertronian hanging from the hook on his shoulder, though.
Oh, man.
That was really disturbing to me.
Yeah, it was chilling at best.
Yeah. The Combaticons come to pick up the Energon stores that the Insecticons have created, and the Constructicons are given a shuttle off the moon to go wherever they want. I guess Shockwave's plan is to just call them if he needs them later. If. But, yeah, by the end of this issue, the end of this story, I was kind of surprised. This is a really condensed, good 4-issue story. What'd you guys think? Because I know I've talked a lot.
I really like them kind of explaining these series. I only know them, again, from the G1 cartoon, and they were very basic. The only standouts were Scrapper and Hooked, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very simplistic ideas. Again, they expand upon it in this one, but I'm glad they expand on the other ones so that they definitely have more of a character other than, they're the other guys as part of this team.
Mm-hmm. What do you think of the story they crafted for them, though? Because I was really impressed that it seems like the writer thought about this from a number of different angles before he settled on how he was going to do it.
Mm-hmm. But again, I think that the first issue was a bit hard, especially with the jumping back and forth so rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
But through the end, as the pieces started to fall together, it's like, oh wow, these guys are just being used left and right, and there's no wonder they just want to just tear things apart.
Yeah, they were given a very raw deal. Joanna, how about you? I know this isn't in your butter zone.
It is not. It's another mecha thing. We just read another mecha. I'm not complaining. It's just an observation. All I know about Transformers is from the Michael Bay movies, and you can laugh if you want to.
That's just a bad source of information right there.
Yeah, I don't feel like laughing. I feel like crying for you.
But then I saw here and there little bits and pieces of the old animated Transformers back in the day.
Okay.
So little bits and pieces here, and then I was watching Beast Wars.
That was a good series.
It had some.
I admit there's some childish moments in.
There's a lot of childish moments,
but it was meant to be watched by kids.
Yeah. Right, but consider the source of who made me watch it. I was kind of rolling my eyes most of the time. There were some interesting bits, but anyway. Transformers really isn't my cup of tea, and I've tried it, and I've tried to like it for people, but I don't think it'll ever be my cup of tea, and I'm not holding that against you guys or the comic. It just wasn't my jam. I had a hard time getting into the plot. I didn't know who these people were, or these Transformers, these Autobots, whoever they were. Constructicons, I didn't really care about their plight, just because I was having a hard time connecting to them. I didn't know who they were in the scheme of things. Anybody who is a Transformers fan, I think, would really go for this. Anybody who likes mecha, probably go for this too. You know, new characters were interesting. I was like, wait, who is this? I don't know who this is. Even in the lore that I have a very limited scope of, I didn't know who some of these people were. It wasn't a bad story. It just wasn't for me.
Okay. I admit, by the end, I was impressed. This is the type of thing where I would be glad to buy, like, the collected 4 issues of this, the trade paperback, and put that next to, like, other things on my shelf.
Yeah, I found it great enjoyment because this is definitely a character study of the Constructicon. So
yeah, it's not my favorite visuals, but it's just so well thought out as a concept that I enjoyed myself after the first issue. Anyway, the first issue was a little bit not tiring, just it took a little while for me to fully wrap my head around, and then after that, it was just bam, 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 really good story moments.
Yeah, I'll admit the visuals again, although atmospheric, seem to be very diluted in a lot of places.
Yeah.
But I still like his visual stills.
All right. Well, I do think that we are definitely shifting gears, because next week we're going to do the first volume of Ignited by Humanoid Comics. And I'm very curious to get everyone's take on this. I haven't had a chance to sit down and read all these myself. This is the one about young people who are developing superpowers in and around a school that suffered a school shooting a year before. And it sounds morbid, but I want to see how that trauma informs the decision of a group of young people. And, you know, we've discussed before how teenagers have a very rough place in American society, where we always seem to expect them to be way smarter than they are, and yet at the same time we expect them to be way dumber than they are. It's very difficult. I'm still having problems resolving it myself between me and my own kids. But I'm an American. I'm an idiot. So what can I say? So next week it'll be Ignited Comics. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed yourself. I am Jeremy.
I'm Joanna.
And I am Jesse.
The Cosmic Library is now closed.
This podcast is part of the Second Union Podcast Network. You can listen, like, and subscribe to all our podcasts by heading over to wearesecondunion.com. Thank you for listening.